Good evening and welcome to 2020 Vision. I'm Jenny Fisher from East London News, and tonight we are going to have an update on the parking situation in Tower Hamlets, which is one of the most hotly debated issues in the borough. We start tonight just with a quick announcement in case anybody is tuned in from Newham. Despite your internet problems, you may be, and which is that there's low water pressure in various areas. I'm just going to mute that. I'm now getting interference. Right. Okay, sorry about that. In postcodes E6, E7, E10, 11, 12, 13, E15 and 16, and E20, there is low water pressure. And if residents in that area want to know more, I need to turn my light on, then please go to the Thames Water website and you can find out some more. Right, but now we turn to our guest. Welcome back, Cllr Andrew Wood from Canary Wharf Ward in Tower Hamlets. And you've been having fun down at the council with parking, Andrew. But let's first of all sort of have a recap on the position. What did the position used to be, and how has it actually changed?
So until August,
Andrew, tragically we can't hear you, or at least I can't.
I'll try again. Can you hear me now? I'm definitely unmuted.
Right. Oh dear, how disappointing. Muted at your end?
Try again.
Is your microphone working?
Yeah, it should be.
Oh, there we are, lovely. Okay, right, so back to where we were. What did the parking situation used to be, and how is the council proposing to change it?
Okay, so until August, Tower Hamlets, from parking point of view, was divided up into zones. So either you're in zone A, B, C, or D. So for example, the Isle of Dogs was zone D. And you could park anywhere in that zone for the whole day if you had a car parking permit, but only in other zones for a maximum of 3 hours. And then the proposed change from the 1st of September was going to be is that actually the zones are divided up into mini zones. So for example, the Isle of Dogs is divided into D1 and D2, but other parts of Tower Hamlets are divided into even smaller zones. So like zone A is divided into 4, and you can only park in your mini zone for the whole day and for a maximum of 3 hours in all other mini zones and zones.
Well, that basically made a nonsense of the mini zone idea, didn't it? Because they might as well just have created, whatever it was, 17 zones. The whole point of having 4 zones in Tower Hamlets was a sort of commonality between the different bits of the same zone. And all sorts of these mini zones would bring disaster, and so they did. So how did you respond, Andrew?
So what happened was in sort of late July, somebody sort of said, oh, the parking regulations have changed. And I hadn't seen anything. There'd been nothing on any cabinet agenda. There hadn't been anything on the council's forward plan. I hadn't seen anything in any emails, so I was a bit surprised. I went to the council website where there was this wording. And to be honest, it took me 15 minutes to work out what had changed because it wasn't entirely clear. So there was a lot of confusion. People were saying, oh, it's changed. And then other people saying, oh, no, it hasn't changed. So I think that was a big part of the problem. And it was sort of saying it's going to be implemented approximately 5 weeks from that date, and the 1st of September. And there's no opportunities for me as a councillor to raise this in any council meeting. So as a result, a number of emails were sent in by concerned residents, and there was lots of chatter on WhatsApp and social media and Facebook. So then a bunch of people decided to raise petitions. So we actually ended up with 3 petitions.
All right.
So one of them actually on change.org, which was raised by a resident, ended up getting over 6,000 signatures. And then Councillor Purumi and myself separately wanted to do a petition on the council website, and I'll explain why in a second. But you can only have 1 petition at a time on the same subject. So it was agreed that our petitions would be combined together, and they are kind of complementary. So it actually worked very well in the end in terms of actually what the petition said. That went to the council website, and then within 5 weeks that got over 2,000 signatures. And the important thing about that is that if you get 2,000 signatures on a council petition on their website, is that means that then at the next council meeting, it then gets debated for up to 25 minutes. And that's basically what happened last week, is that there was therefore a debate about parking issues at the first full council meeting in 6 months.
The council's not meeting in person, though, is it?
No, it was entirely a sort of Microsoft Teams meeting. So it was our first meeting of the full council in 6 months. So there was quite a lot of agenda, but it was also the AGM as well. So we weren't able to cover everything we wanted to cover that night.
Right. Oh, well, back to the old days. So how did it feel actually changing to having virtual council meetings? I know some people really like Microsoft Teams as a platform and other people hate it. I'm of the latter group, I'm afraid. How was it?
I mean, so there are some good bits about it, because it means you don't have to travel into the town hall, so you can be sitting at home in your pajama bottoms if you so wish, which I'm not tonight, but it's entirely possible. Or you can eat. So there have been occasional meetings when I sort of have my dinner while I'm on the meeting as well, and then putting my plate to one side. So to be fair, actually, I think it works okay. And it also, if I use a laptop, I can consult my notes at the same time while speaking.
Yes.
But it wasn't a very efficient use of time, because there were several points in the meeting where we wasted a lot of time doing things that would have been much quicker in the council chamber. So I think there is a loss of efficiency from that point of view.
And I'm not sure how. I mean, I think we have to have virtual meetings at the moment, but I don't think members of the public are enjoying it a great deal. There's something about being present at the meeting, like a rock concert or a cricket match, that just makes it so much more enjoyable in person. And from the tiny, tiny press table that's provided, we have the sport of seeing if we can actually be noticed by the clerks who are going round with tabled amendments. Are we going to get a copy? And do we have to share one, or can we get and all that sort of excitement? But I digress. Okay, so there was a virtual council meeting on the 30th of September, and there were two. Your petition was debated, and the other petition I presume was presented as well. And how did that debate go?
Yeah, so I'll talk maybe later about the other debate, which is about livable streets, because actually that and parking,
it's very linked, isn't it? Yeah,
very much linked. It's about the role of the car in Tower Hamlets and who uses cars. So there is a great deal of linkage. But what I did specifically before the petition is I wrote a motion with some proposals in it, which I then shared in advance with other councillors. So that actually, when we came to the petition, there was a kind of organised structure to the debate. So it provided some kind of background information, some of which I've already just talked about, but also repeated the petitions, and I also said what we wanted. So what we wanted was for this to be stopped. So that was very much what the change.org petition did. And then we kind of said, well, if that's not possible, can we at least delay it until COVID has kind of passed us by, because this is not a good time to be introducing major changes to parking. We've realised parking back during lockdown. And then the third request was, again, not to introduce it until we've done an inequalities impact assessment, which is very much Councillor Perumia's concern about this. So I was asking for a delay in order to do more work on this.
As I understand it, and just to pick up the equalities angle, there's no statutory duty to do an equalities impact assessment, but there is a statutory duty to have regard for equalities principles, and most councils fulfil that duty by carrying out the impact assessment. But they're very hard to find in the council at the moment, equalities impact assessments. Are you finding that as well?
Yeah, and I think it's also whether they're done properly and who does them. So one of the things we made a specific point about in the motion was it should be done independently, ideally by an external party, because typically when they are done, they're done actually by council officers, by the same people making the proposal, or for the same people doing the quality impact assessment. And that might mean is that they perhaps aren't as strict as they should be in looking at all of the details, which I think is a particular issue with parking, because I think there's a lot of emotion and not a lot of facts and data about who has cars. And I've been doing a lot of work on that over the last couple of days, because again, in the debate last week, I kind of felt that you know, information was being presented as fact, which actually didn't tell the full picture, especially as regards who has cars in Tower Hamlets and why people have cars. So.
Okay, so I mean, how did the debate actually go? You were able to speak. Presumably, Councillor Mia spoke. I mean, did everybody join it? Quite often, what happens in a council debate is that you know, the person who is not a Labour frontbencher says something, and then Labour frontbenchers stand up in a queue, and one by one they rubbish what has been said and refer to their own excellent policies, and one feels there's not really much listening and answering going on. How did it go on last Wednesday?
So it went better than that. I was very deliberate in the motion not to make any party political points. Councillor Rabina Khan sort of did second it. But I think one of the interesting things is, behind the scenes, I think Labour were very much split on this issue and this motion in particular. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Number one is that, as the mayor himself admitted a couple of weeks ago, he chose not to consult on this change. It didn't go through any kind of internal party or council processes. It just emerged, you know, fully blown as a policy. And I think the other interesting thing is, one of the things I've been sort of discovering, is that if you look at who has cars in Tower Hamlets, 55% of people of Bangladeshi origin in Tower Hamlets within their household have access to a car or a van. So that's the highest share of any ethnic group within Tower Hamlets. And again, if you look at people living in social rent accommodation, including Tower Hamlets homes, 46% of families have access to a car. 53% of children have access to a car in Tower Hamlets. But when you look at the total population, it's a much lower percentage, because we also have lots of, you know, middle class professionals who live in apartment blocks, who work in offices in their 20s and 30s, who don't need cars. And I think it's that conflict between those two groups that we're seeing a lot of within these debates over parking and low traffic neighbourhoods as well.
Well, I mean, we always used to use as a sort of rough measurement. In London, 60% of households had access to a car, and in Tower Hamlets, 40%. You know, so it literally was reversed in terms of car ownership in Tower Hamlets. But obviously, there are lots of different issues in Tower Hamlets, and I don't really know what the main driver behind the proposed changes was. Was it just air quality? In which case, I think we do have to look at through traffic rather than just local traffic. But has this come out at any point? What's the main driver of no pun intended, for the change?
What appeared to be the driver for this was some problems around some of the district line underground stations, so Mile End, for example, where, because the zones like Zone B is quite big, people would in the north of the borough, near Victoria Park, for example, then drive in the morning down to be closer to the district line station, and then sort of get on the train and go to work in the morning. Probably less of an issue right now. But then when I talked to people who live near Mile End Station, I didn't think that was a particular issue. But that seemed to be the driver for this. And one of the points that I've been making very strongly about this is that there are a wide range of parking issues, and what we seem to be doing is making these little changes, well, not a little change, but making these changes in isolation and not looking at the whole picture. For example, in the Isle of Dogs, that's not really a problem, but it does appear to be a problem in Zone B, and therefore perhaps the solution should be doing something in Zone B rather than doing this for the whole of Tower Hamlets. Because one of the other things we've discovered is there are some parts of Tower Hamlets, especially Shadwell and the northwest of the borough around Spitalfields, where there are a lot more car parking permits being issued than there are car parking spaces, so almost like 60% more. So if you are forcing people into a small area, there may be problems about people finding car parking spaces, which is why traditionally people would drive a little bit further into other mini zones in order to find somewhere to park close to where they live.
particularly if you're on the border of one. I mean, I was talking to an Isle of Dogs resident, not one of your constituents, one of the girls who does a lot of shopping for older members of the community, and she parks her car in the mini zone where she lives. And as you said, the Isle of Dogs has 2 zones, but a lot of people she shops for are in the other zone. So now she can take her car from where she parks it near her own home, go and get the shopping, but she can't then drive because she can't park safely to drop it off to people. And she's done that for a long time, that sort of delivery, and it's obviously become more important in recent times when people find it so difficult to get out safely. So yes, that's a kind of, I mean, she's saving the council money in terms of its, the support network that she's putting there on her own volition. But that again also has been a problem, and certainly I've noticed in in the what area would you call it? I suppose it's south of Brick Lane, isn't it? I mean, I would quite often go to the Whitechapel area, and you always used to be able to park. I mean, actually, again, I used to go to visit an older person who lived on her own and didn't have a lot of resources. Now, you did used to nip round, and you could always park, in Fieldgate Street. If you couldn't park in Fieldgate Street, you went on a bit of it. And now it's almost impossible. I mean, sadly, the person I used to visit has now had a massive stroke and is in residential care. So I don't visit her anymore. But I certainly noticed the parking getting just impossible, really. So these are all valid points. And as you say, they're not really being taken up by the policy. It makes you wonder sometimes who is creating the policy. And it seems...
Yes, in this case, we don't know because it didn't go through any, that's part of the problem. It didn't go through any formal process. There was no paperwork. We as councillors got a briefing paper, but that was 5 days before go live at the end of August, which is kind of useful, but it didn't really provide all of the information. So anyway, so the important point to make is actually in the council meeting, is after presenting this motion, is what the mayor agreed is that, and he sort of used the word pause, is that he would pause the implementation of this in September, even though it's gone live at the 1st of September. For the first month, they're only supposed to be issuing like warning letters, not actually issuing fines. And that was due to start, on the 1st of October. And he sort of basically said it was paused and it would come back to a future cabinet meeting. And one of the things I'm very keen on is making sure is rather than just, warming up of the original policy of mini zones, is we actually use this opportunity to actually talk about all of the parking issues, including what you just talked about, that parking is becoming more difficult, and there are a range of issues that we need to look at. People living in car free, the big problem in my ward is actually at night time at weekends, because people living in car free developments have their cars, but they then park after 5:30 p.m. on a weekday or at weekend. So my parking problem is probably different to parking problems elsewhere, and let's look at all of that in the round. The other big problem we've got is kind of a lot of these sort of car club companies operating in the area. And there's a particular, maybe not so much anymore, but very much a strong feeling that because what was happening is the car club companies were allowed to park in residence bays on the Isle of Dogs, but with a very strong impression of a lot of the users of those cars weren't local residents. They were people at Canary Wharf who'd come out Canary Wharf to pick up their cars. So we were losing residential parking bays for people working in Canary Wharf, not actually local residents. So there's a range of issues that we need to look at, and sort of they weren't being looked at in the whole.
I've noticed there's more car club places. I thought they were just sort of localized car clubs springing up, but clearly not if they're national companies. And the other culprits on my estate, of course, are One Housing Group, where, again, I mean, some people on my estate on Samuda have just a One Housing Group parking permit and just park on Samuda, and some people have an LBTH permit to give them that greater flexibility, and then they park on the road. And when One Housing Group brought in the scheme, parking permits just for Samuda, there was a complete exodus of people who stopped parking on the estate and started parking out on the road because they had LBTH permits. But there we are. But yeah, I came home very late one night last week and was very annoyed to find one housing group van parked in the only 3 empty disabled spaces. One space occupied by one housing group van, and they've got their own underground car park to park in. So I don't know why they were out there. So I had to park at some distance, which made me very cross.
Yeah.
So there we are. There's a declaration of interest there. Okay, so did your motion actually pass then, or did it not get taken because of the mayor saying that he would pause things?
Yeah, so because the mayor said he would pause it and it would come back to a future cabinet meeting, in effect, I agreed not to have my motion go to a vote on the basis of it, and I kind of achieved, or we had achieved what we'd wanted, a pause in the programme and to come back to look at it properly. I mean, so I mean, I know some people, you know, they signed the petition on the basis they don't want this at all. My view is let's, you know, consult people properly on this and look at the wider issues. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but I'm aware of individual cases where, you know, people have built their lives and their ability to live in one mini zone and park in another mini zone for completely valid reasons. I don't know there's that many of them, but certainly I know of some cases people have approached me and need to sort of be talking to those people to see what the right solution is for everybody.
So are you resting on your laurels now, or are you just hoping that the cabinet discussion will be positive, or is there anything that you think members of the public can do to influence the cabinet discussion?
So what I think I said before is talk to your local councillor about parking issues, because what I don't want to have happen is the same mini zone policy just comes back to cabinet and it's a box ticking exercise. Let's use it as an opportunity to do this properly in terms of a proper consultation and a proper debate and an equality impact assessment, and let's have policy made in the right way rather than, this is too common both in central government and local government, it's just doing things because you think it's the right thing to do, the evidence to back it up.
Indeed. Okay. Dear listener, if you want to share your parking horror story or good story, if you have one, with us, you can ring in straight to the studio on 0208 12345 07. Or if you have any other issue you'd like to bring to the attention of the viewers. So yes, we were talking before we actually came on air about various administrative problems, and it seems that another issue has been this going paperless thing. I was talking about a local workplace which had a letter, applied for some business permits as some of their staff were trying to avoid public transport, and got an email back from the council saying you are now on the white list, which seemed extremely strange terminology, but apparently meant we have adopted a paperless system and you are now on the database. So you won't get a permit, but actually you can park without fear. It was all very strange. And another member of our team was saying, Andrew, wasn't he, that he had had no reminder this year that his permit was due to expire. So he'd had to make and then it seemed there was no more renewals and he'd had to make a fresh application. And again, he was waiting for a paper permit to arrive. And it was only because we were talking just now and you were able to say, oh, you don't get a paper permit anymore, that he realised, that he was waiting in vain. So there seems to be other measures going on which are confusing the parking population as well. Yeah. Have you heard any more horror stories?
Yeah, so they implemented a new parking system, I think, at the end of last year or beginning of this year. So one of the key components of that is it's all been done online. So you need an account online. And also there is no paper permits anymore. It's all done electronically. And you don't have to put anything in your windscreen anymore. So if you look at people's car parking permits, quite a few of them now are sort of over date because they're just the old ones that people haven't bothered to take out. So the group this has caused the most problems for are obviously the elderly, the people not on the internet. The idea was originally that you could go to an ideas store and get help. And obviously, even before COVID, there were problems with that. And obviously COVID meant lots of ideas stores were shut down. So unofficially, the council is still issuing paper scratch cards to some people if you ask for them, but that's just a sort of temporary workaround. That's not meant to be how the process works anymore. And I've had more casework to do with parking issues or gremlins or the system not working properly. I've had more in the last 8 months than the previous 6 years as a councillor.
Wow.
So, I can't even remember before, the end of last year, ever having to deal with any casework to do with a parking application, maybe to do with parking tickets, but nothing to do with how the process itself worked. And since then, I've probably done, 10 maybe. I had to give people advice as well. And also on Facebook, people asking each other. In fact, I saw one example earlier today of someone saying, how do I do this? I don't, it's not clear. And other people helping them explain how the process works online now.
Yes, and it's also, coming back to through traffic, as I say, in the COVID crisis, people are trying to avoid using public transport, and it's very costly to park in Tower Hamlets if you're coming here to work, actually to buy a permit, even if you offset the cost of your public transport fares that you're saving, and you have to pay it all at once, of course. And not many people can afford £600 or £800 for an annual business or public sector users permit at the drop of a hat, without any warning that the key worker scheme was being dropped. So unhappiness all around. Although I was just trying to think about it, and I think this may be the first time the administration has had to stop and have a rethink quite this publicly. Since about 1994, I can't remember a similar overturning.
In my time as well, I don't remember. But as I said, because I think they completely messed up at the beginning by not doing consultation and not going to cabinet or not advertising this properly. So they broke their internal processes. And that created, I think, resistance both from the community and from councillors as well. I understand that Labour councillors, at least behind the scenes in internal meetings, were anti this change as well in the way that it was implemented. So,
well, there you are, members of the public. We've always told you that if you speak up and you're active, you can influence those in charge, and this seems to be the case. Incidentally, I noticed there was a press release on the Tower Hamlets website saying that they're putting in 182 new vehicle charging points. I don't know how many they've got at the moment, but they're putting in 182. When you actually look at the press release, that's going to be 82 early next year and 100 later next year. And the target is to have 150. It doesn't say, but I think it might mean an additional 150 by 2025. And I was trying to do the sums and I gave up because they were just boring. But 182 vehicle charging points. We've got a population of 300,000. If you say that's 150,000 households, which it may or may not be, and if you say that 40% of them have cars, that's about 60,000. So if there's about 60,000 cars, which may of course be, there's a wide margin of error in that estimate, it might be only 30,000 cars in town, but there's certainly more than 182 cars in Tower Hamlets. And so again, if the council's serious about sort of reducing pollution, then shouldn't it be more proactive on helping people to switch and then charge their cars? I don't know if that's something that your constituents raise with you, Andrew.
It's something I've done a lot of work on over the years, and I think it's another example of Tower Hamlets Council not delivering and completely failing, and I'll give you some examples. So I think currently, if I remember correctly, we have 42 on-street electric car charging points in Tower Hamlets. Those new electric car charging charges that you talked about just now are all because of external funding, so they're all being paid for by other people. So Tower Hamlets Council, despite having huge amounts of cash, Section 106 and Cllr and New Homes Bonus, isn't willing to put any of its own money into electric car charging points, even though in theory they will pay for themselves because people have to pay to use them. And I also laughed when I read that article because Tower Hamlets Council has spent a lot of money installing new LED street lights across the area. You might have noticed them, they're quite smart. And they had to replace not just the lights, but the columns as well, because the old ones were being corroded on the inside because they hadn't been galvanized. So they basically put in a whole bunch of new street lights, including quite a few next to car parking spaces. And you can get these street lights equipped with electric car charging points in the base. That's quite common in other boroughs. And we completely missed that opportunity. Is we put a new street light with a new power supply right next to a car parking bay, and didn't think to put in an electric power point at the base. And for me personally, this is really frustrating, because a number of years ago, I went to Tesla. I don't know if you know, but Tesla actually had a shop in Canary Wharf where they were selling some very nice electric cars, and I did a test drive of one. And they are, if I had lots of money, I would buy a Tesla, but unfortunately I don't. But I was very impressed, and I did lots of work with Tesla trying to find out, could they help us and advise us on perhaps do electric vehicle charging on streets, because that's all in our common interest. It's in Tesla's interest, and it was in our interest. And I went to the council and I was like, Tesla, why would we want to talk to Tesla? They're for rich people, nothing to do with us in Tower Hamlets, even though Tesla still are, this is experts on electric vehicles. And we declared a climate emergency last year. There is still no electric vehicle chargers anywhere in any council building. We've only got two electric vehicles currently. One is used in parks as kind of like a golf buggy type thing, and the other one is used in a transport depot. That's it. We have no electric vehicles anywhere in our fleet of vehicles. So Tower Hamlets Council have been absolutely shocking in this area in terms of on-street electric charging. And I was reading a press release this morning, the first Volkswagen ID3s, I think they're called, but basically they're the Golf. So if you know a Volkswagen Golf, one of the most common cars on the road in the United Kingdom, its replacement is an all-new electric vehicle, and the first cars arrived in the UK this week. So, within a couple of years, there will be a good selection, both in the new market as well, increasingly in the second-hand market of electric vehicles. And there's almost no way that. So in my ward, I've got 4 electric vehicle chargers on the street. They're all next to each other on Mill Harbour, and that's not going to be able to allow people to make the transition to electric unless you live, with a car parking space on your own property or with a private car park.
Extraordinary. I mean, that's a very unusual definition of the word emergency, isn't it?
Yeah. It's this with the Tower Hamlets is they talk and they talk and they talk and they don't deliver. Even when they say things important, they don't deliver. And this is another example of that.
I think the council definitely is moving at the moment. I mean, there's lots of other issues which we don't have time to delve into tonight. But some of the cuts in services are very surprising. There used to be some things that made Tower Hamlets just really, really top notch, particularly in the field of education and looking after some children with severe difficulties. And we seem to be losing so much now. I think there's some work to do still on some of these projects, but and
it could get a lot worse. So if you walk around the Canary Wharf estate and look at all of those closed shops and restaurants, 40% of our income, so 40% of the council's income comes from business rates. And business rates paid by businesses, across Tower Hamlets, but really a lot of them are based in Canary Wharf. So if you see a closed shop or a closed restaurant, that means in future years, if they don't reopen, we're keeping our fingers crossed on this, there's less money for the council.
Well, it's certainly an interruption. I mean, we've got a cabinet member for Brexit. It looks like we need one for corona recovery as well.
Well, I personally think that working from home, if working from home really takes, really lasts into the future years, where increasingly more people work from home and only come into the office maybe 50 days a week, that is for us much more serious, I think, than Brexit in terms of the economy of Tower Hamlets and the council finances.
Oh dear. I think what you were saying about Tesla was interesting, coming from a council which is all too keen to embrace Canary Wharf and do business with the Canary Wharf group. There we go. Sorry, you mentioned you wanted to talk about livable streets, the policy which, if you don't say it carefully enough, makes a lot of people think we're talking about Liverpool Street, and we're not talking about Liverpool Street at all. it's livable streets, and this is the council's strategy of trying to remove unnecessary vehicles from streets, trying to return streets to the population, make them safer, go back to the good old days when children could play out a lot more safely, and people could be saved the pollution. I mean, I remember years ago, actually in 1994, some councillors did some work in East India to close off a through route through most of the Aberfeldy and what's that other one called? Teviot estates, only for that in recent years to have been reversed, and now that road's been opened up again. There's just standing traffic there twice a day, and it's that process which is being reversed, although not, I think, in that area, more in the north of the borough. So I know a lot of the projects have been very divisive, with some residents very much in favour and others very much against. So what's your take on Liverpool streets? What you said that was debated again at the council. What was the point there?
Yeah, so again, that was because more than 2,000 people signed a petition on the council website, and it was basically against the idea of just closing off roads is the solution and stopping all traffic. And I think, again, a little bit like the parking one, it was about process. So people who are against livable streets are not completely in favour of cars being able to go everywhere. It's basically about how do we make these changes carrying as many people as possible with us, and being concerned about the lack of consultation and not being listened to. So in one example, I know the residents proposed an alternative design and they were kind of dismissed. In my particular area, I'm in favour of making a change on one road because it's not sustainable to leave it unchanged. But again, what the council solution was to physically close the road. And I've been saying to them, well, that's actually not possible because of all the construction that's happening on that road. Because you just force the construction traffic in the other direction, which would actually be worse than the current situation. So I think a part of the problem is feeling that it's kind of a one-size-fits-all policy applied across Tower Hamlets, and that policy is just to block off roads. And a lot of people who are sort of anti-LTNs or livable streets are actually in favour of the idea of using number plate recognition cameras. So you'd allow some people through, but not others. So people outside of the area, if they try to rat run, you'd have to pay £65 every time you did it. But if you lived in the area, then you'd be able to get through. And that would allow people who are disabled or emergency vehicles much easier access than if you just completely block off the road. And I think we're in this strange situation where the council have closed two roads, one Old Ford, and then they reopened it. So what was the point of that? And then the other one is Brick Lane, and I'm hearing is that will get fully reopened as well. So we're closing roads and then reopening them again.
I don't know what problem we're trying to solve half the time. I'm beginning to wonder if I'm just getting old and past it. I can understand closing some parts of Brick Lane during the period of time when restaurants were open but needed more space for social distancing, and yeah, that seemed to make sense. And I must say as well, the council has done some very good work around a number of schools in the borough, widening the pavements on a temporary basis, putting in temporary obstacles to widen the pavements so that parents can get in and out delivering children, or I suppose in secondary school, so that children can get in and out, pupils can get in and out, while still social distancing. And so that, we do have to say, I think the borough has done well on some occasions. But this issue of trying to really cut down on the roads that cars can have access to, I mean, it's not going down well in so many areas. There's some very good coverage on the excellent Radio 4 just a few days ago from Lewisham. I don't know if you heard it, where there was an area, a residential area, about 20,000 residential properties, and they'd blocked it off essentially, and the residents were loving it. But the traffic it thrust onto the main roads was very upsetting for the people who lived on the main roads. It just was really extending the rush hour and slowing things down, so you got much more by way of emissions. And was it you, Andrew, or was it somebody else who said they've cut off part of Bow for through traffic, and there's 1,000 cars extra landing up on Mile End Road now. So we seem to be doing the same thing here.
Yeah, no, so I didn't say that because actually I did want to go visit during some of these closures to see what was happening. So I went down to Brick Lane a couple of weekends ago to see what the impact was on a Saturday, middle of the day, and it was a little bit of a chilly day, and there were some restaurant tables outside, but nobody was sat at them. So I think the Brick Lane closure would have made a lot of sense in August when the weather was really nice, when I think people sat outside. But by the time they made the implementation, I think they said they missed the best of the bad weather. So I mean, in terms of Brick Lane, I do disagree with some of the anti-LTN protesters. So I actually think Brick Lane is a logical road to make major changes to. And sort of I'm half German, and I went to Germany in August to visit my mum, and their equivalent of Brick Lane, it's open, so you can drive through it, but nobody ever does because doesn't look like a road. It's what they call these streets. So there are no signs. It's kind of a completely different texture of road. So people, feel very comfortable walking through it. And if people do need to make, deliveries, or, shops need deliveries, you can still access the area early morning or late evening. So I think, Brick Lane does need to change, especially at weekends when you have all of the tourists. Just the way it was implemented, it was really strange. There were some areas that were open and some areas that cars were driving through. So there was no consistency in Brick Lane, and I don't think what now actually worked very well at all.
It would just be nice to have local or national government that really made you feel like it had some vision. I just feel everything's very contradictory at the moment. I think you're right to say, people will work from home a lot more. And this idea about, can you all please save the city centre by going out to the cinema, going out to the shops, going and eating out, when I think it's, was it 500,000 people have been told over the last 6 months that they made it. Yes, it was 498,000 people have had notice that they're going to be made redundant or have been made redundant over the last 6 months. And we can't save their jobs by furloughing them, and we can't save their jobs by all going and making this voluntary. Because I think people forget the balance in the economy. The reason why restaurants and so forth work is because people have jobs, and when people fear for their jobs, they stop eating out. Full stop, end of. And you can't adjust that balance. So why can't we make some radical changes? And instead of trying to do these strange sticking plaster jobs with the hospitality industry and so on, let's find some ways to transfer people to make jobs in recycling and green energy and so forth, the things that we need very quickly. It just seems not to give you a great deal of confidence for the future. So I don't know, we'll see what's happening in Tower Hamlets and the rest of East London soon enough, I guess.
Yeah.
So we fight on, and we drive the good drive, and try to park somewhere at the end of it and see where we're going to go. I just did you get a chance to see John Biggs's recent statement on coronavirus? It's dreadful, but will you all please behave? I think was the title, or something like that.
Yes, I shared it as well on social media because I thought it was quite an important message. So the message about not going to visit other sort of family members, even though so that's not official guidance. That's what he's asking people to do as well. And I think it's because the evidence does seem to, what they're saying is the evidence that they're seeing is that most of the transmissions that are taking place are actually within homes. And that sort of echoes some of the things that were happening in other parts of the United Kingdom as well, that a lot of the evidence was suggesting is that the transmissions were within homes, not in workplaces or restaurants or other places.
I thought it came across potentially a little bit regal. I mean, if you sort of rewrote it, instead of putting Tower Hamlets, you put My Subjects or something. I mean, it literally could have been drafted for Her Majesty herself, I thought. And I wondered if John Biggs quite has that cachet after, that leverage on the population, particularly after sacking so many of the council workforce and putting them on worse terms and conditions. It seemed a bit...
Well, I mean, I think it does raise this kind of fundamental issue: who is the best person to present information or guidance? Is it a politician? So in Scotland, it's Nicola Sturgeon who does it all. In England, it's kind of a mixture of the politicians and the scientists or the scientific advisors. And different countries do it differently. And there's an argument, actually, the best person to be doing this kind of stuff is actually Dr. Soman Banerjee, who's the director of public health at Tower Hamlets Council. Perhaps it might work better if he was the public face of some of these things. But generally, it has been the mayor who has sort of, when things have been said, generally it's coming from the mayor. But,
you're right. We could see a bit more of Dr. Banerjee, and I tell you what I like about him is he's somebody who does seem to listen as well. So I had a number of exchanges with him where there was one on the committee, the Health and Wellbeing Committee met to discuss the drop in breast screening, the take off of breast screening for the over 50s or whatever age it is you have to be offered it. And they had a long debate about it, and he bounced out, "Oh, we've just discussed this, and we've got a few measures, some extra posters, and da 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 da." And I just said, "Well, you've just moved it from Mile End, which everybody knows where Mile End is, to Barts. Where is Barts? Nobody knows where Barts is, and you have to get a tube to go there. It's not a bus ride away. Put it back at Mile End, then you'll see the rates going up." I don't know if he did it, but I did see that it was back at Mile End. Which I think it's still at. So, but it was nice talking to him. And it's not always that you talk to a council officer and you get that kind of meeting of minds. So there we are. Good, right, okay. I think that's probably a good airing of the subject. Andrew, is there anything else you'd like to add before I've got a few little headlines to give out to people before we go on?
No, just except to say, it is important to talk to your local councillors about your views on these issues. Part of the problem is that there's a group of people who are very organised on this subject with a set of views, and I think we need to be able to talk to a wider range of people and make sure we're making decisions based on evidence and consultation and hearing from everybody. Fantastic.
Well, you've been very generous with your time. Andrew, that's Councillor Andrew Wood from Canary Wharf Ward. So we'll let you go now, and I'll just want to talk to the viewers about one other thing. So thanks again, Andrew, and hopefully we'll see you again in the future when the Cabinet has taken place with some more information. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night. Okay, that was Councillor Andrew Wood. Now, I'm just going to ask the office to just put up a poster that I gave them and just talk to that. One of the things that is of great concern in Tower Hamlets at the moment is the impending cuts in the special educational needs, the support for learning service, which has been giving a lot of children a lot of assistance. They have just hearing that we can't actually upload that poster at the moment. So what I'll do is, the cuts were basically, I think, were agreed some time ago, but the detail is now out, and the detail is quite worrying. It seems that the council is trying to cut some £650,000 from SEND provision. It's hard to put that in context, isn't it? But at the moment, there are 28.5 posts in the Support for Learning service. And that's a team of specialist teachers who work to support special educational needs teachers and others in school. And those teachers who are very highly regarded in the borough by the professionals, there are 28.5 of them at the moment. And the council thinks it wants to cut the number of those professionals down to 13.5. So that really is of great concern. That service is not it's stretched enough as it is, and Tower Hamlets has a high incidence of children with special needs. I would put a link up in the chat below this broadcast, but I don't actually have a link to that. I just have my own copy of the leaflet to read from. So I think we'll try to cover that in East London News. and maybe put it out on our Facebook pages. And I think at the moment there's a sort of formal consultation going on with staff, and I don't know if there's going to be another public consultation, but there will be time, I'm sure, to make this this issue more widely known, and perhaps people who are getting worried about car parking, threats to car parking, will also be kind enough to try to help defend this service that so many of our children rely on. We do have a higher number than average of children with visual impairments and of children who are deaf or only have partial hearing in this borough, and we have had very, very good facilities to help them. And it's really, I don't think the cuts that have been made have necessarily been proven to be acceptable, to not be harmful. At the moment, there are 5.5 teachers retained by Tower Hamlets Council who've got the expertise in working with children with visual impairment, and they support teachers in schools with advice and training to work with visually impaired children in their schools. That number of 5.5 specialist teachers is going to be cut to 2. We have 6.5 teachers who, again, support school staff who work with deaf and partially hearing children. That's going to be carved to 3. What is the justification for this? Nobody can say we've only got half the deaf children that we used to have, or that deaf children are only half as valuable. That's lovely, there's a leaflet going up there. So it has to be just to save money. And is there not something we can do? Can't we save a little bit of money from these livable streets if we just delay the proposals a bit? There must be something we can do to save these jobs. And at the moment, you can see now a leaflet has gone up showing you a meeting that's going to take place, a Zoom meeting, of course, on the 21st of October. The National Education Union, who I think most of the teachers involved in these threats are part of that union. National Education Union is holding this meeting, and doubtless it'll give us more details about it. So let's actually look across the borough at our most vulnerable populations and actually try to defend them from the worst aspects of the cuts. I mean, you have to balance the council budget, but really, deaf and visually impaired children, children with special needs, should not have to pay for that. Some of them are not going to be able to have much of a voice in the future, but many more of them have a great potential. Some of the children who are deaf or visually impaired could go on to be MPs. We've had 2 very famous MPs who have significant impairment in terms of their sight. And I think many of them look back on chances they had in their very young years. So we don't know who, by not helping, we don't know who we're denying the chance to fulfill their true potential. So the 21st of October, I'm sure there'll be lots of publicity out at 6 o'clock. Look out for the publicity and join that Zoom meeting and show your support. We'll come back to that again next week and give you more information about that, and then we'll have a link for you to look at, and so you can get an automatic link up to the meeting. There's also a petition going around again. We'll try to publicise that, but I'm sure you can try to find it. So thank you for your help on that. There's lots of other fun news across East London at the moment. Just pick out a couple of the best bits. The Tower Hamlets Council is very pleased that it's put some new play equipment at Bartlett Park. We still await hearing whether they've made any improvements to their strange changing rooms, the ones that have no hot water. Tower Hamlets and Newham are both reminding people that I think there's been a special adoption day, that they have schemes to help people adopt children, and they're looking for more people who can adopt. So get in touch with those councils or any other council where you may happen to live if you think that might be something for you. I'm sure people are on the lookout for that again. Only Hackney, over the East London boroughs, has noticed that the 1st of October was International Day for Older Persons, and they are consulting on their Aging Well strategy. Barking and Dagenham is still closing things down. That's their job out there. They've closed down this, I don't have trouble saying this, shisha bar, an illegal party, and a car repairs shop in recent days. And but one thing that's interesting about Barking and Dagenham, they seem to be giving out some sort of payment to people who are having to self-isolate because of the contact they've had from test and trace. It's not universal, it is restricted, but if you are in financial difficulties and having to self-isolate, have a look at the Barking and Dagenham Council website, and you may get some help from there. And finally, Redbridge. Redbridge are reopening their libraries, and they are going to renovate Woodford Green Library. They're very pleased about that. They're encouraging everyone to get a flu jab. I actually will speak up for flu jabs. I had mine last week from the excellent chemist in Poplar High Street, who are very good. I was slightly wrong-footed as I headed to the chemist to get my flu jab, because outside was a certain Mayor John Biggs having his photograph taken. I thought for a moment he was trying to get a selfie with me, but it turned out he wasn't. So I don't know what that was about. And Redbridge have got a test centre set up in Gants Hill Library car park. So you can go and check that out if you need to. Okay, well, thank you for listening today. We'll be back again next Tuesday with more local news. If you have an issue that you are trying to push, do get in touch with us and let us know what that is. I just remembered, actually, there's another issue coming up. There's a meeting on Palestine, as I was going to mention. Yes, that's on Thursday, this Thursday at 7 o'clock. And this seems to be the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. They're holding a discussion about Palestine, and what's particularly exciting about it is that it's between Jeremy Corbyn and Mustafa Barghouti. So that really should, if you're not busy at 7 o'clock on Thursday this week, that should actually be really quite exciting. Again, we'll try and give that some more publicity. But if you go on the Palestine Solidarity Committee website, I think you should be able to find more details of that. It'd be nice to have a bit of escapism from our ordinary lives and to listen to some really solid political discussion by people who know what they're talking about. So, okay, now we really will close. Again, thank you for listening. Good night, and we'll see you next week.